Long before history was etched onto stone or inked onto parchment, your body was already a library. Within every cell lies a record, not just of who you are, but of who your ancestors were. Their struggles, their triumphs, their wisdom. It is a resonance that hums quietly beneath the surface of daily life, waiting to be heard. Modern science is only beginning to glimpse what African traditions have long understood. The body remembers. It carries the songs of survival, the imprints of resilience, and even the echoes of ancient rituals. These are not abstract notions. They are living truths encoded in your very DNA, shaping how you move, feel, and respond to the world around you. Africa, the cradle of humanity, is where this story begins. Every human alive today carries genetic footprints that trace back to this vast continent. It is here that language, culture, and spirituality first blossomed, and it is here that the earliest chapters of our genetic story were written. To understand ancestral resonance, we must return to the source, to Africa, where wisdom was woven into life itself. Think of a drumbeat echoing across a savanna. To the untrained ear, it is rhythm, but to the community, it is communication, guidance, memory. The same is true of your genes. What may appear to be silent codes of biology are, in truth, ancestral drums, carrying signals of survival and wisdom from the distant past into your present life. The science of epigenetics reveals that experiences do not vanish with time. A famine endured generations ago may still ripple through your metabolism today. The trauma of displacement may still echo in patterns of anxiety. Just as importantly, the healing rituals, rhythms, and practices of your ancestors may strengthen your resilience now. Science calls this genetic expression. Africa has long called it remembering. Across African traditions, memory is not confined to the mind. It lives in the body, the spirit, and the land itself. When elders recite proverbs, they are not merely teaching, they are activating memory. When communities gather in circle dances, they are not simply celebrating. They are synchronizing with ancestral rhythms encoded deep in both culture and biology. Your heartbeat is the first drum you ever hear, pulsing through your mother as you grow in the womb. For many African cultures, rhythm is sacred because it reflects life itself. And rhythm, like memory, is inherited. It is passed down not only through music, but through the very patterns of your DNA, shaping how you feel and how you connect to the world. But this is not just about biology. It is about a profound cultural inheritance that moves through song, story, and spirit. The proverbs of an elder, the cadence of a drum, the dance of a ritual. All of these are forms of ancestral memory, carried forward across centuries. They are bridges between the ancient and the present, between wisdom and survival. In this journey, we will explore how your genes carry ancient African wisdom. We will uncover the science that proves memory can live in DNA and the traditions that preserved this knowledge long before laboratories confirmed it. Most of all, we will see how reconnecting with ancestral resonance is not only about honoring the past, it is about unlocking the full potential of the present. Every human alive today carries a map of Africa within their DNA. Scientists call it the genetic footprint of origin, and it tells a story older than history itself. Long before kingdoms rose and fell, long before nations carved their names onto the earth, humanity took its first breath on African soil. That soil still speaks through you. The evidence is undeniable. Fossil remains, from the ancient hominids of Ethiopia's Rift Valley to the remarkable discoveries in South Africa's caves, all trace our earliest beginnings to Africa. Genetic studies confirm this truth. Whether your ancestors migrated to Asia, Europe, the Americas, or beyond, their roots reach back to a shared African mother, sometimes called mitochondrial Eve. But Africa gave us more than biological beginnings. It gave us the first sparks of culture, spirituality, and knowledge. The earliest languages emerged here. The first symbolic art, carved ochre and painted stone, comes from African caves more than 70,000 years ago. These were not just decorations, they were signs of memory, identity, and imagination taking form, passed down as part of our human inheritance. The Nile Valley civilizations added new chapters to this story. Kemet, known today as ancient Egypt, developed systems of medicine, astronomy, and mathematics that still inspire wonder. Yet Egypt was only one voice in a vast choir of African wisdom. From Nubia to Mali, from Ethiopia to the Yoruba kingdoms, Africa cultivated knowledge systems that blended the practical with the spiritual, anchoring survival and meaning and resilience. Consider Mali in the 14th century, when the city of Timbuktu was home to libraries holding thousands of manuscripts on medicine, law, and astronomy. Knowledge was not locked away for elites. It was woven into community life. The Dogon people of West Africa, through oral tradition, preserved intricate knowledge of the stars that modern science only confirmed centuries later. These were not coincidences. They were echoes of a worldview in which wisdom, science, and spirit were inseparable. This richness is not distant history. It lives within us. The rhythm of migration, the necessity of adaptation, the creativity of survival. These became encoded in our genes. When your ancestors left Africa tens of thousands of years ago, they carried not just physical traits, but also the imprints of cultural resilience. Every person on Earth is, in some way, an heir to this African foundation. Yet for those whose ancestors remained on the continent, or were later scattered through the transatlantic slave trade, this resonance is especially powerful. The memory of African ways of healing, the cadence of African languages, the pulse of African drums, these did not disappear. They transformed, adapted, and survived in new lands, keeping the ancestral voice alive. Science and tradition converge here. Genetics shows that humanity's origin is African. Oral histories remind us that wisdom is never lost, only carried forward. Together, they paint a picture of ancestry as more than biology. It is a continuum of survival and creativity that still shapes how we live, think, and even dream today. In the vast story of humanity, Africa is not just the beginning. It is the heartbeat, the drum that set the rhythm for all who came after. And when you listen closely, in your body, in your memory, in your spirit, you can still hear that rhythm echoing. Your DNA is more than a static code. It is a dynamic storyteller. Each strand carries not only the instructions for building your body, but also the imprints of experiences lived by generations before you. This is where the science of genetic memory and epigenetics enters, offering a bridge between biology and ancestry, between science and the wisdom of African traditions. To understand this, let's start with the basics. DNA is the blueprint of life, written in 4 chemical letters, A, T, C, and G. These letters form the code that builds your body. But genes are not simply on or off. They are more like musical instruments waiting for a conductor. Epigenetics is the conductor, deciding which genes are expressed, when, and how strongly. And what influences the conductor? Environment, lifestyle, trauma, even cultural practices. For decades, scientists believed genetic inheritance was rigid, locked at birth. But research has revealed something astonishing. Experiences can leave chemical marks on DNA, influencing how genes behave without altering the genetic code itself. These marks, called epigenetic tags, can be passed down to children and even grandchildren. In essence, your grandmother's stress, your grandfather's diet, or your ancestors' survival of famine may still echo in your body today. One striking example comes from studies of Holocaust survivors and their descendants. Researchers found that trauma experienced during the Holocaust altered stress-related genes in children born long after the events. Similar findings have emerged from studies on descendants of enslaved Africans, where historical trauma seems to shape not only cultural memory, but also biological responses to stress. What was endured did not vanish. It became written into the very biology of survival. African traditions have long acknowledged this idea, though in a different language. The belief that the ancestors walk with us is not just spiritual poetry. It reflects an intuitive understanding that experiences echo across generations. Rituals of remembrance, libations poured for the departed, songs sung in ancestral honor. These practices do more than preserve memory. They align with what science now recognizes as the intergenerational transmission of resilience. Epigenetics also explains why culture and healing practices matter. Consider diet. Communities in West Africa thrived on nutrient-rich foods like millet, sorghum, and leafy greens. These foods did more than sustain life. They influenced genetic expression related to metabolism and immunity. When diets shifted under colonial disruption or modern industrialization, bodies carried the imprint of both past nourishment and present imbalance. This is why reconnecting with traditional diets often restores not just health, but harmony at a genetic level. The same is true of stress and healing rituals. Studies show meditation, rhythmic breathing, and communal singing can positively influence gene expression, lowering inflammation and strengthening immunity. African traditions, from Yoruba drumming to Ethiopian chanting, embody these practices. What Western science now prescribes as therapy has existed for centuries as ritual, and those rituals, repeated across generations, may shape biology itself. Environment also plays its role in ancestral resonance. The intense sun of Africa shaped melanin expression. Harsh climates sculpted endurance. Long migrations trained the body to adapt quickly to scarcity and abundance. These adaptations were not forgotten. They became epigenetic memories, carried forward to descendants living in completely different worlds, yet still shaped by environments their ancestors once endured. Healing plants offer another key connection. African herbalists used remedies like moringa leaves for vitality and rooibos for balance, long before laboratories tested their effects. Today, science confirms that compounds in these plants can switch genes on or off, influencing inflammation, immunity, and aging. In other words, ancestral plant wisdom anticipated epigenetic science, encoding healing not only in culture, but in the body itself. Even creativity carries epigenetic weight. Children raised in environments rich with rhythm, language, and story often show enhanced brain development. In Africa, where storytelling and music were not luxuries but lifelines, creativity itself became survival. The songs of griots, the chants of elders, the dances of warriors, all train the brain to adapt, remember, and thrive. That imprint remains, echoing in descendants who may never have set foot on African soil. What makes this science so revolutionary is not just its discovery, but its resonance with ancestral wisdom. Epigenetics validates what many African philosophies have taught. Life is interconnected, past and present are woven, and healing must address not only the individual, but the lineage. You are not separate from those who came before you, you are their continuation. When you feel sudden strength in adversity, it may be your ancestors' resilience encoded in your genes. When you crave rhythm, storytelling, or community, it may be your biology remembering the practices that once ensured survival. This is genetic memory at work, not a metaphor, but a living reality written in the double helix of your being. The science of epigenetics does not diminish the spiritual, it affirms it. It shows us that memory is not confined to the brain, nor wisdom to books. Memory is cellular, wisdom is biological, and together, they remind us that ancestral resonance is not myth, it is measurable, observable, and profoundly human. Long before laboratories and universities, African societies built vast systems of knowledge. These systems were not written in textbooks, but carried in stories, songs, rituals, and practices. They were alive, transmitted from elder to child, from community to community, woven into the very rhythm of daily life. To understand ancestral resonance fully, we must see how these traditions functioned as living libraries of wisdom. Storytelling was the heartbeat of memory. Across the continent, griots and oral historians preserved centuries of knowledge without a single page of paper. Through epic tales and proverbs, they transmitted history, moral codes, and survival strategies. A proverb from the Akan of Ghana teaches, "The ruin of a nation begins in the homes of its people." This was not only philosophy, but a genetic lesson in resilience, warning future generations about the costs of forgetting responsibility. Spiritual systems, too, encoded ancestral memory. The Yoruba tradition of Ifa, practiced for centuries, is based on divination, ritual, and an understanding of cosmic balance. Ifa is not merely spiritual guidance, but a sophisticated system of decision-making that integrates psychology, ethics, and community health. Its patterns of divination resemble algorithms, structures of information processing that modern scientists would recognize as systems of complexity. Among the Dogon of Mali, cosmology reveals another layer of ancestral intelligence. For generations, Dogon elders described the star system Sirius with accuracy that modern telescopes only confirmed in the 20th century. To the Dogon, this knowledge was inherited, passed down as sacred memory. Whether encoded in oral transmission or embedded in the subconscious, it shows that wisdom has many forms, and science does not always arrive first. Kemet, the ancient Egyptian civilization, carried its own resonance across millennia. Its medical texts detail surgeries, herbal treatments, and diagnostic practices that align with modern medicine. The concept of Ma'at, balance, truth, and harmony was more than philosophy. It was a worldview guiding health, justice, and cosmic order. The echoes of Ma'at live on, reminding us that balance in life is both spiritual and biological. These wisdom systems also reveal how Africans viewed the human being as inseparable from the cosmos. Illness was not only physical but spiritual. Healing was not isolated to the individual but extended to family and community. Rituals of cleansing, drumming, and collective dance were not mere performances. They were methods of restoring resonance between people and the universe. Today, science affirms the same idea. Community, rhythm, and ritual lower stress hormones, regulate breathing, and strengthen immunity. Proverbs condensed complex truths into memorable lines. The Igbo say, "A man who carries a load with his head does not also carry it with his heart." Beyond the poetry, such wisdom teaches psychological resilience and instruction for managing stress long before therapy sessions existed. African traditions understood that words were medicine, shaping thought and, through thought, shaping biology. What is remarkable is how these traditions resisted erasure. Despite colonization, enslavement, and displacement, African wisdom systems adapted and survived. In the diaspora, they re-emerged in disguised forms, in spirituals sung by enslaved Africans, in the drum patterns of the Caribbean, in the chants of Candomblé and Santeria. These were not new inventions, but ancestral resonances adapting to new worlds. Modern neuroscience and anthropology now acknowledge that oral traditions carry as much intellectual weight as written texts. They train memory, enhance creativity, and reinforce community bonds. In this sense, African wisdom systems were not primitive, but profoundly advanced, ensuring survival not only through tools and weapons, but through culture and consciousness. To see these systems clearly is to recognize that wisdom does not die. It transforms. The songs of griots echo in hip-hop lyrics. The proverbs of elders find new life in motivational quotes. The cosmologies of the Dogon inspire both scientists and spiritual seekers. Ancient African wisdom lives on, not as relics of the past, but as currents flowing through the present, resonating in both culture and biology. In connecting science with these traditions, we see a larger truth. Epigenetics shows that memory is biological. African philosophy shows that memory is cultural and spiritual. Together, they reveal that human beings are not separate from their ancestors, but continuations of them. You carry not only their blood, but their wisdom, their creativity, and their spirit. And when you speak a proverb, dance to a drum, or listen to a story, you are not just participating in culture, you are activating resonance. You are, in a very real sense, awakening the wisdom of your genes. Health in African traditions has always been about more than the body. It is about balance between self and community, spirit and earth, mind and environment. Ancient healers understood that illness was rarely isolated to one person. If one member of the community was sick, harmony itself had been disturbed. Healing meant restoring resonance on every level. Herbal medicine formed the backbone of this approach. Across the continent, plants were seen as both nourishment and cure. Neem leaves, known as the village pharmacy, treated infections. Baobab fruit provided immunity through its rich vitamin content. Bitter cola was used to strengthen vitality and fight fatigue. These were not random choices, but carefully tested remedies passed down through generations. Today, laboratories confirm that these plants contain compounds with antimicrobial, antiviral, and anti-inflammatory properties. What ancestors prescribed from experience, science now validates through research. But healing was never only about herbs. Rituals played an essential role. Among the Shona people of Zimbabwe, ceremonies with drumming and spirit mediums were used to call on ancestors for guidance in restoring health. The Yoruba practiced rituals of cleansing, using water, song, and movement to realign the spiritual with the physical. These were not symbolic acts alone. Rhythmic drumming synchronizes brain waves, collective chanting regulates breathing, and ritual immersion reduces stress hormones. Modern neuroscience now recognizes what these communities always knew: ritual heals. Food itself was medicine. African diets, rich in whole grains, legumes, vegetables, and fermented foods, created resilience against disease. Millet, teff, fonio, and sorghum offered sustained energy and balanced blood sugar. Fermented foods like ogi or injera supported gut health long before microbiomes became a scientific focus. The wisdom of "you are what you eat" was already embedded in daily practice. When diets shifted under colonial influence to refined flours, sugars, and processed oils, the harmony between genes and food was disrupted. Ancestral diets remain keys to unlocking genetic balance today. Mental and emotional health were also woven into the fabric of community life. Instead of isolating individuals with grief or trauma, African traditions relied on collective healing. Mourning was expressed through song, dance, and ritual, ensuring emotions flowed rather than festered. A proverb from the Swahili says, "Sharing joy multiplies it, sharing sorrow divides it." This wisdom speaks to modern psychology's findings that community support lowers stress and builds resilience. Even the landscape itself was part of medicine. Sacred groves, rivers, and mountains were not only spiritual sites, but ecological pharmacies. People understood that respecting the environment meant sustaining life. The destruction of these ecosystems was not only cultural loss, but biological harm. Today, as scientists uncover the importance of biodiversity for medicine and health, ancestral practices of land reverence reveal themselves as both spiritual and profoundly practical. What is striking is how healing traditions traveled and transformed. Enslaved Africans carried plant knowledge to the Americas, blending it with indigenous practices to form new healing systems. Hoodoo in the United States, Obeah in the Caribbean, and Candomblé in Brazil all preserved fragments of African health wisdom. Though often suppressed, these practices kept ancestral memory alive, offering remedies, rituals, and resilience to those denied access to formal medicine. Science continues to circle back to what ancestors already knew. Meditation lowers blood pressure. Drumming regulates the nervous system. Plant compounds heal at the cellular level. The separation between modern and traditional medicine is dissolving as researchers discover that both paths lead to the same truth. The body remembers, and healing is the act of restoring resonance. To embrace ancestral health knowledge is not to reject modern science. It is to complete it. It is to see that wisdom is not confined to laboratories, but also lives in kitchens, in forests, in songs, and in rituals. Your ancestors were scientists of survival, experimenting with herbs, rhythms, and diets for thousands of years. Their discoveries live within you, waiting to be remembered and reactivated. Healing, then, is not simply recovery from illness. It is reconnection with self, with community, with the land, and with those who came before you. When you eat traditional foods, when you participate in ritual, when you honor the environment, you are not only healing yourself, you are strengthening a chain that stretches back through generations, ensuring that ancestral wisdom continues to flow forward into the future. When you hear the deep vibration of a drum, something stirs inside you. It is not simply sound, it is memory. For millennia, rhythm has been the pulse of African life, carrying messages, guiding rituals, uniting communities, and perhaps most importantly, it has been a force of resilience. Creativity in Africa was never entertainment alone. It was survival, healing, and continuity. Music is one of the clearest expressions of ancestral resonance. The djembe drum in West Africa, the mbira thumb piano in Zimbabwe, and the kora harp of the griots are more than instruments. They are carriers of memory. Each rhythm encodes stories of birth, initiation, battle, and harvest. Neuroscience shows that drumming synchronizes brain activity, strengthens social bonds, and reduces stress. This means that when ancestors drummed to call the community together, they were also regulating collective biology. Dance, too, was medicine. In countless African traditions, dance was inseparable from spirituality. The Zulu war dance, the dances of the Maasai, and the trance dances of the San people all carried layers of meaning. They aligned body and spirit, celebrated strength, and allowed release of trauma. Today, psychologists recognize movement therapy as a powerful tool for healing, echoing what African societies practiced long before. Storytelling was another art of resilience. Griots, poets, and elders preserved not only history but wisdom, shaping identity through narrative. These stories taught moral lessons, explained the cosmos, and connected communities to their ancestors. Modern science affirms the power of story. It strengthens memory, activates empathy, and shapes brain development. Every proverb, every folktale was a way of programming resilience into the minds of the young. Spirituality wove all these arts together. In African traditions, creativity was inseparable from the sacred. Music was prayer, dance was ritual, story was cosmology. Through these practices, communities communicated not only with each other but with the divine and the ancestral. The Yoruba Oriki, praise poetry, invoked ancestors and deities through sound. The Dogon masked dances aligned human movement with cosmic order. These were not mere performances, they were dialogues with eternity. When Africans were torn from their homelands during the slave trade, these practices became lifelines in the diaspora. Stripped of possessions, they carried songs, rhythms, and dances in their bodies. In the plantations of the Americas, African spirituals encoded secret messages of escape and survival. In the Caribbean, drumming and chanting merged with indigenous and European influences to create new forms like reggae, salsa, and calypso. Hip-hop, born in the Bronx, carries the griot's tradition into the modern world. Storytelling through rhythm and poetry. This adaptability is itself a form of ancestral wisdom. African creativity thrives under pressure. When suppressed, it transforms. When silenced, it finds new language. The ability to adapt and create is one of the most enduring legacies carried in African DNA, a testament to survival against unimaginable odds. Resilience is not only cultural but biological, encoded in the way bodies and minds respond to rhythm, story, and spirit. Even science recognizes this today. Studies show that engaging in creative practices improves mental health, boosts immunity, and enhances problem solving. When you sing, dance, or tell stories, you are not just expressing yourself, you are activating biological processes of healing and growth. This is why African traditions saw no division between art and life. Creativity was not optional, it was essential to survival. Spiritual resilience was also encoded in ritual. Ancestors were invoked not out of nostalgia but as active participants in the present. Libations poured onto the earth were reminders that the living and the dead are connected in a continuous flow. This belief fostered strength. No individual stood alone. Behind every person stood generations of ancestors, offering wisdom and courage. Modern psychology calls this intergenerational support. African spirituality calls it truth. What we see in creativity, spirituality, and resilience is the same principle that underlies epigenetics and memory: continuity. Nothing disappears. Energy transforms, stories adapt, songs evolve, but the resonance remains. Whether in the rhythm of Afrobeat, the poetry of a spoken word artist, or the sway of gospel choirs, Africa's ancestral voice still sings, reminding us of who we are and what we carry. In every act of creativity, there is remembrance. In every rhythm, a heartbeat of the past, and in every story, a map to resilience. To embrace creativity and spirituality is to embrace the wisdom encoded in your very being, wisdom that refuses to die, wisdom that continues to guide humanity forward. Within you is a library older than any monument, deeper than any archive. Every heartbeat carries the rhythm of your ancestors. Every breath is shaped by choices they made, foods they ate, and songs they sang. You are not simply an individual standing alone in time. You are the continuation of a lineage stretching back to Africa, the birthplace of humanity itself. We have seen how science confirms what African wisdom always knew. Memory is not confined to the mind, but written into the body. Trauma, resilience, healing, and creativity all ripple across generations. Epigenetics names it gene expression. African philosophy names it remembrance. Both speak to the same truth. Your ancestors live within you, shaping your present and guiding your future. We have journeyed through Africa's ancient civilizations, where knowledge blossomed in story, rhythm, and ritual. We have explored herbal medicines, diets, and healing practices that modern science now validates. We have felt the power of music, dance, and storytelling as living expressions of resilience. And we have discovered that creativity and spirituality are not luxuries, but survival tools encoded in both culture and biology. The lesson is clear. Reconnecting with ancestral resonance is not only about honoring the past, it is about unlocking your own potential. It is about healing what was broken, restoring balance where it was lost, and carrying forward wisdom into a future that desperately needs it. To embrace your ancestry is to embrace strength, knowledge, and resilience far greater than yourself. So the next time you hear a drum beat, remember that it is more than music. It is a call across time. When you share a proverb, you are passing on survival strategies carried for centuries. When you gather in community, you are enacting rituals of resilience as old as humanity. Every act of remembrance awakens your genetic wisdom. Your DNA is not a prison of the past, it is a key to the future. And within it, the voices of Africa continue to speak, urging us not to forget, not to sever the chain, but to live fully in the knowledge that we are never alone. If this journey has stirred something in you, a spark of recognition, a sense of belonging, a deeper connection to who you are, then let it continue. Join this community, where we explore the wisdom within our DNA, the stories of our ancestors, and the science that brings them to life. Subscribe now, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to remember the power they already carry. Because your genes are not silent, they sing, and the song they sing is Africa.